Hey everybody, I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SF DocFest. It's exciting to have you all here. As you can see, we're still living in this kind of weird and wacky world of COVID. So we're doing a hybrid festival. So some of you have had a chance to see this wonderful film at the live in person at the Roxy, and some of you are streaming it in the comfort of your own home. So for the magic of technology. And you just saw the really cool film Spaz, and we're lucky enough to have the director Scott here, and of course the star of the show, Steve. Thanks again for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Maybe a good place to start is Scott. How did you kind of first get kind of familiar with Steve's story and know that there was kind of a documentary in the making here?
Well, we worked together at ILM when I was in '94, when I just started as an intern, and we were storyboarding together. So I met him. I was storyboarding for him, and that's when I met him. And started hearing a lot of these stories about things that went on behind the scenes that were never in the behind the scenes like documentaries about what happened. So there were like sort of these company, sort of dramas and secrets that I never knew about. And so that's when I started to think about like, wow, there was a whole story of how this digital transition went down that I always felt, even back in the 90s, would make a great documentary, like sort of a tell-all piece about the people and what went down with the people.
And as now looking back on it several decades, like how do you think this kind of story you were thinking about back in the 90s kind of evolved in the sense of reflecting on, and of course, how transformative that time was? What you thought of the story at the time, did it change over the years?
Well, I mean, at first I wanted to just make a movie that was more or less a making of documentary that was more procedural and about how they did it. And I thought, maybe that's the way to do it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it really needed a character at the center of it to make it more of a human story, with the technological advancements as a backdrop. And so that's when I started to kind of alter the way I was editing the piece. But yeah, I mean, when I think about what's going on today in movies, this little short span of time absolutely changed everything in terms of the way movies are made.
And Steve, based on who you are, like when Scotty kind of brought up this idea of like, hey, I want to kind of tell some of your story. How did you feel about that? Were you tentative at all, or did you want to kind of reflect back on this time? Or
Well, I sort of made a policy that what you see is what you get, and I felt that I just been sort of driven by trying to tell the truth with imagery, because I sort of had a policy that anything visual was possible. So I thought, okay, if you want to tell, you want to look underneath the hood and see what's ticking, I've got nothing to hide, because I wasn't hiding anything when I was forward with those things. And as a matter of fact, it became kind of a novelty because of the resistance I ran into, right? So there was almost this symbiotic rebellion that went behind it. So I thought, you know what, in order to back up the side of it, so it's just not all bravado, you might as well show all the dirt as well as involved with it. So I had no issue showing that, because I figured, I was striving for truth, so why not tell the truth about everything? Because there's really nothing to hide.
that's a cool way to approach it. And going back, in doing it, it's like, what do you think it was about that particular time, or the way that you were kind of thinking that kind of allowed some of these developments to happen?
Well,
like
good question. Fortunately, I sort of I've been dealing for a very long period of time, even prior to ILM, with resistance, especially resistance to new ideas. And one of the things I noticed when I got to ILM, there seemed to be more of a laboratory environment, because I think they had a lot of funding comparatively compared to what I was used to. And there was also other people I ran into, like Mark DePay, who was really the only one. It was a very small department when I got there, like 5 or 6 people at that time. And they were still licking their wounds from the amount of money Lucas had spent, $40 million on digital compositing solution, ended up with RenderMan, sold the whole thing away. and became Pixar. So, so the environment itself, to me, was very fertile for research at that time, right? Especially when the old technique was so embedded. And I just had this kind of crazy policy, as did Mark. He shared the same thing, to pay that, images on a screen are like a bathtub full of colored ball bearings, right? It's just really a matter of time until they're organized to which anything visual is possible, and that was not shared by the Illuminati, at ILM, because we're still very much, at the mercy of photochemical, right? But if people were believing what they saw with this matrices of pixels on a screen, the human eye sees 10 million colors. We were calculating 16.7 at the time. So it really is just a matter of time. It's a very simple equation, and the tools that we were working with at the time were very crude comparatively, like forward kinematic systems and RenderMan at that time, which was very well developed, by the research that had been done previously. So I figured with those combinations, it really, it was like, it was an open ticket for me to go crazy.
Do you think, this question is for both of you, it's like, do you think if that resistance hadn't existed, do you think the resistance pushed you forward in a different way than you would have been there if, I guess
no, the resistance made it more difficult for me, and we would have progressed a lot further, a lot faster had I not run into the roadblocks I did. Right. So yes, there is the natural force and resistance that goes on, which is, as I said, symbiotic, kind of thing. But it didn't have to be difficult. It could have been a lot easier. Right. But the one thing I did not realize walking into a place like that is that you're dealing with you're dealing with rewards, and the rewards are like gold statues and retirement homes and vacation homes and stuff. To me, all that was foreign crap to me, the Hollywood bullshit, kind of thing. And that was foreign to me, so truthfully, it didn't have to be difficult, but it revealed a level of greed that I've never seen before in my life.
Mm. And Scott, as you kind of were digging into things, how did you kind of decide, what was the kind of aesthetic approach that you wanted to kind of take, and, in it being a kind of, largely historical story, how did you know you were going to kind of, visually tell this story?
Well, Steve, I had gone to visit Steve to film him at his house several times. And it seems like each time I came to the house, there would be a new box of stuff on his kitchen table that he found in the attic or in the basement. And it was just, Steve kept so much great, I want to say, historical artifacts from that time. He kept everything because I think he knew what was going on back then was going to change, was going to be a major historical moment. But I also think he just loves keeping all his favorite things. So I was kind of, as a documentarian dream, fell into this situation of having incredible amounts of archival footage on video, mini DV tapes, as well as documents and tons of photos. Because back then in the 90s, people were still using cameras and film to take their pictures, or using digital cameras, but everybody was still printing film. And so there was just like tons of photographs lying around that I could scan at a high resolution. And so it was just, it kept rolling in that direction where it's like, this is as all the ingredients needed to tell a great visual story of a very specific time.
I really just kept a lot of the stuff, but when the process was going on, when we were going through that in the late 80s and the early 90s, it really was a lot of fun, regardless of the resistance. It was just a lot of fun. So a lot of the documentation surreptitiously grew out of, just sort of trying to chronicle how much fun we were having, because I knew it was never going to be like this again in my life. I knew it, and I was right about that. It was really a playground for 10 years,
It's like the idea of keeping your prom carnation, from
which I still have.
Yeah. It's a,
yeah. I guess so. Yeah. Did you find, like, going back and making the film? was it a fun process? It was cathartic, I mean, now that you've seen it, I mean, you know how films are made. I mean, was there something that kind of surprised you in the end, Steve, that you didn't expect that might come about through this process?
Was that for me, Chris?
Yes, that's for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, no. Yeah, it was cathartic in a lot of ways because what Scott was doing was essentially what I had done, which was chronicle everything in boxes. Okay, so what he was doing was kind of culling it down, parsing it, and getting to the essence of it. Because I knew eventually the truth would prevail, kind of thing. And and obviously it as time went on, kind of thing, there was massive defeat. I mean, I had no more fight left in me at that point, and I had kind of said, after the Jurassic days, I said there really is no more empires to conquer because I've just destroyed one. And that was called filmmaking, with the advent of the destruction, the abolition of imagination. There was no Ridley Scott moment anymore where your mind looks at something and you extract a small bit and then you use computational math in your imagination to fill in the blanks. That was gone. And I don't think that I need, to state any more proof, in today, looking at what the manifestation of film has become, which is really essentially, a locked video game, not first player, first observer video game, which are movie franchises now, in my view, right? But this was a warning years ago. We had at the same time we had unextincted and re-extincted dinosaurs like that, kind of went away, and it's kind of sad, but it's a very powerful weapon, and so the process itself, I felt none of us really knew it was going to head around that way. Yes, I did foresee 30 years ago this is probably a good thing, but it's actually not a good thing because it's going to be used irresponsibly, and I don't think that I need to state anymore, about the irresponsibility of the fentanyl franchises that have been produced out of it, and so that it backfired to some degree. It did backfire. Did I answer your question? I think I was all over the map. Did I?
No, I think I think in the sense that it mentioned cathartic and also kind of an idea of being able to reflect back of what these things mean. And I guess a question for you, Scott, is like, was there now having finished the film, was there anything that was kind of surprised you that you just didn't expect to learn, or something that you kind of discovered about Steve, or what was going on during those times that you just surprised you, or kind of hooked you as you were kind of making the film?
I think all the way along the way, I was learning more and more because Steve would remember more and more as we go. And then the other thing that I sort of never had the chance to do in the past was to talk to other people that were in that circle at the time and ask them the same questions. And so everybody has a different memory of like things and details. And so like, and then I would, tell Steve, I just interviewed so-and-so and they told me this, and then it would trigger another memory. So there was always this like kind of increasing knowledge or understanding of what the details of what happened back then, how it unfolded. So I think that the process of creating a documentary with an ensemble cast of people talking about their memory of how things happen, I learned a lot more than I would have with just the few people that I was talking to at the time back then.
Chris, the whole sort of movement back in '88 with Abyss and then Terminator and then on, it was very innocent. I mean, we weren't doing it in spite. The spite developed only in time when there was such blatant, wanton, resistance. And not only was there resistance, there was like, we were being told not to do it by the same people that would get the award, and that became evident after a time. And I thought, this is probably one of the most blatant degrees of theft I've ever seen in my life. And me being a dumb Canadian guy, like I didn't know. And it took a while, a few blows to the head for me to figure that out. And that's truthfully what happened. And then finally, by the exodus of ILM, I was just, they didn't need me anymore because I'd set up the methodology. So, and that was plug and play, you know.
And when you look back now, there, with young people that are out there kind of trying to do new things, whether it be in, filmmaking and the arts, it's like, what would for somebody that's kind of, starting out and maybe trying to do something different, is there anything that any sort of guidance or thoughts in regards to
Absolutely.
the way there and to create new things?
I'll give you in a sort of a simile. The thing is, when you look at the way nature renders an image, right? All we do is try and copy nature, and nature has never won a VES award, all right, ever, right? But yet it still renders the most beautiful image in the world, right? So the greatest teacher is still nature, right? So the simplicity for students, like, people say, oh, I bought my son, inverse kinematic, XXI, blah, blah, blah. And I said, great, get him a block of wood and a knife. He'll learn a lot more. And then when she graduates is off of metal, clay, and wood, then, they're sort of appropriately educated to go on to the data side, right? Because if you're like, when I would interview people, by example, I wouldn't ask I knew what their real was. It didn't matter. I would ask what their outside interests were. Do I blacksmith? I've done everything with my hands. I was ripping lawnmower engines apart long before, I was touching computers. So the point being is that an understanding, of the way things work in nature, right, seems to get injected into the actual character they're animating. It's those outside, as opposed to now we have function key 7 walk cycles. Like, oh, just grab that asset from this other movie and we'll just put a different set of data on it, right? But use the same walk cycle. And Disney would do that with Christopher Robin and Mowgli, incidentally. They'd switch, they had literally ape the walk cycles, So it's not uncommon. So my policy was just a greater understanding of the way nature operates, the study of nature. I know it sounds all zen-y and all that kind of stuff, but honestly, that's really the way it is. And I said, in terms of cinematography, Spielberg had a very, very good statement. He said, never put a camera where you wouldn't believe, which I always, and that, as time has gone on, when you look at the cinema vometry of like the Transformers franchise, right? The camera's all over the goddamn place. It's not real anymore, even though it's rendered beautifully like that. And all the shadows and specular drop off and subsurface scattering, stochastic ray tracing is perfect, but the camera motion is all awry. So that's why I tell people, get a camera, get your friends, put it together, do a composition, right? And then they end up learning about the psychology of talking to people in order to get them to perform in front of a camera properly. So I know it sounds old school, but that's the way it is, and the problem with whole technology in general, it's removed relationship, from the individual. So an individual can now animate an entire movie themselves, right, and do all aspects of it, but there's no relationship between the reality, right, of what interaction with another human is, because you don't have to. Technology has removed that. And with social media, you get to wear a mask. You're not even the real person anymore. So I think that, without trying to jump all over the map, I think that those types of things I try to eliminate, and what I tell people, tell students, and stuff, it's the reality of the way it is, because that's all we're trying to do. Humans are driven by trying to replicate ourselves synthetically. Computer graphics is a blueprint for that.
Yeah. I guess it goes to the proofs in the pudding. It's like, the output's only as strong as like what you put into it. And obviously diversity and variety is kind of a magic ingredient.
That's actually a very key statement, in that it's what you put into it. So, but the problem is the expectation is so high that it's a minimal amount of work with a computer for a maximum amount of impact. And as a result of that, there's a detachment from the reality, of what a good performance is, what good camera work is, what good storytelling is, right? Because it's literally, you hit a key and it can generate so much, whereas it was more painful. It's kind of like, it's almost at the level of grinding your own inks in order to pencil properly, Hopefully some of that makes sense.
Well, very cool. No, I think it's really cool. And I think it's a lot of, it's kind of neat to kind of hear your process on things. I know we need to wrap up. I mean, Scott, is there, for those of us that are in the kind of the festival audience, it's like, we're kind of your grassroots street team to kind of help spread the word. And I'd encourage everybody after you watch the film, the Q&A, just kind of share on social media and let them know about this really cool film Spaz that you saw. What are ways that people can kind of follow both the film's life and kind of other projects, and then what can we do to kind of help spread the word?
Well, I would say start with checking out the website, spazmovie.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. So I think right now, just go ahead and start following the social media stuff. And then we're actively selling the film now. So we're probably gonna be making an announcement in the next couple of months here in terms of an actual distribution company that's purchased the film, and where you'll be able to see it in a broadcast fashion or streaming fashion soon.
But Chris, so the one thing I'll also add, I know there's some sort of, a bit of an unease about again, the name Spaz, right, was also very innocent in itself. It was the name of a server, right? It stood for substitutional protocol, something like that I was on. And I thought, I've had so many logins. I thought, and we had an internal email system. So it said mail from, and I thought, Spaz, like the character from Meatballs, isn't that funny? And you think but it just exploded from that. Right. And then being an ex, junior hockey player and everything like that. And so there was this dichotomy, that was going on. Right. So that's really how it grew.
Everybody knows him as Spaz.
Everybody. My mom was the only one who wouldn't call me that.
He literally has all his professional screen credits.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All my screen credits say Steve Spaz Williams. And it backfired, actually. It was supposed to be an internal little, because no one had email back then. There was like 7 of us that read email amongst us animators and engineers. Now, that was supposed to stay internal, but, you get guys, with their pants pulled up here with pen protectors pointing at me, go, "You're a Spaz," like that. I mean, it was this juxtaposition thing that kind of backfired.
Well, Scott, thanks for making this really cool film. And, Steve, thanks again for opening yourself up to kind of be part of this film. And we appreciate you guys being part of SF Doc Fest.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having us.